Hello and welcome back. This is a relatively new miter saw that I bought. It is second hand, but I did get it at a very good price. And it is a Makita 12-inch miter saw. And as you can see, it's sitting on the floor, and that is not a very useful place for it. So in today's video, we're going to build a miter station. The miter station is going to run along this wall here. As you can see here, there's a lot of junk in the way. So let me quickly clean this up and I'll be right back. So now it's all cleaned up. The miter station's going to go somewhere around about there, maybe a little bit more to the right. And we're going to have a table on the left and a table on the right hand side. Now I didn't have to buy any timber or lumber, as you say in the US, for this miter saw station, because I had all the framing timber left over from the old building that we pulled down before we built the new shed. And I think there's plenty here to do what we need to do today. The first step is to mark out the total height. So that's the top of the table, and I'm coming down 25 mil or an inch. That's the thickness of the top that I have for it. And then I need to come down another 90 millimeters. And that's just because of the way the legs are configured, which I'll talk a bit more about later on. So anyway, that measurement down the bottom there is the one we need to cut our legs. Each leg is made up of 2 pieces and they're glued and screwed together. So I've sorted out 8 pieces here, and I can get the 2 pieces from 1 piece. For these boards, there's some nail holes in the middle and they will get missed because I can get the 2 pieces from each side. So I cut one, I clean up the end on the second piece, mark it out and cut that second piece. So there's 2 pieces for 1 leg. I do a quick sanity check. So the back piece that's against the wall, that is 25 millimeters shorter than the height that we wanted, and that is correct there. This is how the legs go together, 2 pieces. I need to remove staples here from the old building paper. Then I work out the fronts and the backs. We use a spacer block at the end, and then I know where to glue this bottom piece. Then I get the top piece, that gets pushed down, making sure I've still got that same gap. And then I clamp these 2 bits of wood together. I put a couple of C clamps or G clamps in the middle to squeeze out the glue. And then these are screwed together with some 75 millimeter or 3-inch screws. And that is basically how you make one of the legs. I'm making a bench for each side of the miter saw, and each bench will have 4 legs. So there they are, all finished. Remember earlier we had to take another 90 millimeters off the length of the leg. That's because when these 2 pieces of wood are put together, they become 90 millimeters longer. Now I've got the tabletop on the floor here, and I'm measuring out how far it comes, which is 700, and I want a bit over sticking the framing of the bench by about 50 millimeters or 2 inches. The 2 tops are cut to length and they're just sitting here on the floor. They haven't been screwed together yet. I bought this Kreg pocket hole jig for making pocket holes in the nogs that go between the rails, and that hides the screws from the front. To be honest, it was quite a bit of work just drilling out one set of nogs, and since this is recycled or reused timber, it already has nail holes and stuff in it anyway. So for the rest of the build, I just screw the screws in directly from the sides. I'm placing in these nogs in between the 2 rails. That gets clamped up. They're all glued as well. I'm flushing off this top surface here. So this is the top of the table, and that will be flush, so the tabletop board should sit nice and flush on there. That is the first one complete. This is the smaller table. There is another piece that I need to make which is very similar to this but a bit narrower, which fits sort of inside it. You'll see how that works when I put the legs on, but I make that piece off camera. So ready to put the legs on, plenty of glue in there. We put them there, put a clamp on, and then we just put 1 screw in here so I can move it around if I need to adjust it. Once all the legs are on, more glue goes in, spread it round, and this is the other piece I made off camera, which fits in here. Remember, this is being assembled upside down, so this is actually going to be sitting on the floor, this part at the top. That's all clamped up. Then I checked for square across the diagonals, and that looked pretty good. So I go ahead and screw everything off. Once all the screws are driven home, the part is tipped over to the right way up and put against the wall. And this is the tabletop that I had for it. Now I've built the second one off camera, and I'm just placing on this last piece. So same process, clamp it all down nice and secure, check it for square, and then we drive in the screws to secure all the pieces together. So the structure for the two tables is pretty much completed. Those tabletops are just sitting on top at the moment. I need to sand the structure down and bog up any nail holes and things in them. And I'll probably paint them because, as I said, the timber is secondhand. There are nail holes and screw holes in it, so I'm not going to get a very good finish, so I think painting it will probably be the best option. For the front parts that will be seen, I'm using a filler here to fill up all the holes and imperfections in this secondhand timber. Once that's dry, they're sanded back. I then completely undercoat both tables. Once the undercoat is dry, then I paint it with a top coat. I apply 2 coats, and this colour is iron sand. I noticed a few high spots on the top face here, so I'm using the electric planer and just smoothing those down a bit, and I check it with the level to make sure that everything is nice and flat. That is the top surface, and that is now completely flat. These are leveling feet, and I saw this from another video. They're pretty good. There's the foot there, comes with a bunch of screws. There's an Allen key for adjusting the height, and there's a spanner for tightening up the where the hell's the lock nut? What the? I found some M10 nuts in the garage, so had to provide my own lock nuts. They go on there like that. Now this spanner is really loose. It's rubbish. And that's where they belong. I screw the feet in place. There's actually 4 screws on this surface and 2 on the bottom surface, so they're quite secure. Once all the feet are in place, then we can adjust them. Pretty simple, just using the Allen key on the threaded part there. You can see here I turn it a couple of turns just to get that bubble more in the center. I've gone and found myself a decent spanner, and those feet are then locked into place. The left hand side or table is then fixed to the wall. These screws are being screwed into nogs that run inside the wall there. I've mounted the adjusting feet to the right hand table, and this is the largest straight edge I have. It's 3 meters long. It doesn't span completely 2 tables, but man, I am happy with this. This is so flat and perfect. Now check that with a level, and that's nice and level. Very happy. I've seen a lot of miter station builds on YouTube, and a lot of people get caught out by the miter angle and the handle of their saw hitting the bench. So here I'm just making sure I've got enough room to clear that bench. Once that's all sorted out, the right hand table is then attached to the wall. Again, there are nogs behind the wall here. Then I confirm that the thing is still completely level, which it is. I'll put some screws lower down as well, but my screws are not long enough. They're only 100mm, 4 inches long, so I have to recess this piece of wood to drive in this bugle screw. Now the tables are all done, the next job is to work on the piece in the center that the saw will sit on. I've cut all the pieces out and I'm just screwing those together. That assembly is all held up with those sticks that you can see in the corner, and everything is screwed to the wall and to the two benches. I add a piece of wood on either side, and this is so that I can screw the top piece down along the sides, and I also add a piece in the middle as well. I fill in all of the screw holes and old nail holes and any other imperfections. This is a top piece that I cut out, and this fits in absolutely perfect. Now the problem is, it's not thick enough. I can shim this piece up, I guess, or shim up the saw, but I'm going to use some 21mm ply, and that should be the right thickness or very close to it. I've made that top and painted it off camera. It's actually in 3 pieces because I didn't have a full piece to do this in 21mm, and just screwing it all off now. Then I do a bit of paint touch up where it got a little bit scratched when I was putting these bits in. When I bought these tops, I did know that it had this sort of little cutout here, but I didn't realise it had these bits here that were away from the wall as well. Now these are about 16-17mm, and the overhang we have on the front is about 2 inches or 50mm. So I've got enough room where I can cut along this line here, and then once that's done, then this piece here will be flush against the wall. I put some masking tape on the top side. Hopefully that's going to cut down on any chipping that might occur. I use a straight edge here and it's clamped in the right place, so I cut the line where I need to cut it, and both sides are cut. I take the masking tape off and the edge came out pretty good, to be honest. So now this goes up against the wall, and that is really flush against the wall. That is very nice, I'm happy with that. As you can see, I've pulled out the pocket hole jig again. I have to do this because we're screwing the top down from underneath, and I have to say I did have a better experience with it this time. The screws go in from the bottom here. This is the first one, and I'm pretty pleased to see that it didn't pop out the top and basically go all the way around with the screws underneath. Now it's time to mount this table saw to the table, but I have a little bit of a wobble here, and that's because the table saw is slightly high. It leaves a gap. If I push down on this corner and compress the rubber, then I don't get so much of a wobble. So I'm going to screw the screws in and just carefully wind them in until the whole saw is level. I've centralised the saw this way, and we're using the stainless screws to mount it to the table. Now there is some structure under here for the screw to go into. So 4 screws are screwed in. And then I come back and I just turn the screw about 1/4 of a turn each time, and then check on the straight edge. And if there's still a wobble there, I just need to go a little bit more. And we have to go around the back there and do a little bit on that one as well. So just 1/4 of a turn at a time, and then eventually I get to a point where this is very flat, and I'm happy with that. The next job is to set up to install this T-track. So I'm going off the fence here, just drawing a line on the tabletop. Then I set up the fence in the right place, and I route this groove for the T-track. I'm only routing half the depth on this first pass. Then I use 2 T-tracks and I wind down the cutter until it's pushing on the table, and that's going to allow the T-tracks to be slightly below the surface. I do the second pass off camera and the T-track fits in there like that. And I can feel that it's just a smidgen under the surface. I'm just taking off a very small amount here for the metal rulers that will be stuck down. Those rulers will be stuck down there like that. The next step is to screw the T-track in. I'm being careful not to strip out any screws. Next I install the flexible rulers. I'm using a long ruler here and just touching off on the blade tooth that's pointing to the side. Then on the tabletop itself I work out how many millimeters that is, and then I cut the tape at that distance. The backing is then peeled away and I start the tape right on the edge there and just massage it into the little channel we have. That is the left hand table done, and I do the right hand table off camera. Now we test out the ruler, and I've cut a nice face on here. I take that over to 60, which is 600 long from the blade. Cut off the other end, and then measure that with the tape measure. And as you can see here, we're bang on 600, so that works perfectly. There you see both T-tracks and the rulers have been installed. When I did the test I got a lot of dust all over here. I have no dust collection at the moment, but this saw has good dust collection. There's 2 ports here and there's a big boot in the front, and it's supposed to be pretty good, but we'll deal with that on another video. On the right hand table you can see a big gap here, and that is so I can install an under table router that I can lift up and use this end of the table as a router table. Again, that will be in another video. And that pretty much concludes this video. I'm pretty happy with the miter station. It came out really good. A lot of the ideas here I did get from YouTube, and I'll leave a couple of people that have also made videos on this style of miter station, and I'll leave those in the description. I hope everyone has a good day, and thanks for watching.